In February 1873, Peru and Bolivia signed a secret defensive alliance treaty against Chile. When the war broke out 6 years later, Argentina, which also had border conflicts with its western neighbor, was invited to join the alliance. Although there were drafts of trilateral treaties, in the end, the governments of Avellaneda and Roca chose to remain neutral. What would have happened if Argentina had joined against Chile and opened a third front during the War of the Pacific? Are you interested? Go ahead. So stay until the end of the video. As always, let's go back to the background. During the Spanish era, the borders between the Viceroyalty of Peru, the Captaincy General of Chile, and the Royal Audience of Charcas, present-day Bolivia, were not clearly defined. After the independence, the area between the 23rd and 25th parallels in the Atacama Desert, where there were great mineral riches, became the apple of discord between Bolivia and Chile. Both countries tried to resolve this through diplomatic means. Through the Treaty of 1866, a zone was established where they would share the income obtained from mining. The Treaty of 1874 replaced the previous one and set the border at the 24th parallel, but established that Bolivia would not increase taxes on Chilean companies. For 25 years, the benefit lasted only 5 years for the Bolivians. The government of Hilarion Daza imposed a new tax of 10 cents on saltpeter for Chilean companies, which refused to pay because it violated the Treaty of 1874. Bolivia then ordered the confiscation of their assets, and Chile responded by occupying the port of Antofagasta, which started the War of the Pacific. But of course, Bolivia supposedly had an ace up its sleeve, which actually turned out to be as useful as an airplane horn. A secret defensive alliance. And deterrent with Peru, which was about as discreet as the marital problems between Macron and his wife.
A hand pushes the president's face. The moment lasts only an instant.
Since Chile discovered it and demanded that Peru remain neutral, what happened then? Peru is dragged into the war on the side of a country lacking a navy and with little military power. A catastrophic result for both allies. Bolivia lost its access to the sea and Peru lost the provinces of Arica and Tarapacá. Perhaps the great hope of the allies was the possible intervention of Argentina, which would have opened a third front for Chile, who was also fighting against the Mapuches in the south. Bolivia sent the then diplomat Mariano Baptista, and Peru sent José Antonio de la Valle to persuade Argentina, with as much success as Trump, to mediate between Russia and Ukraine? The question that arises is, what's all the fuss about Argentina? Let's see what the borders between Argentina and Chile were like in the 1870s. All of Patagonia remained untamed since the Spanish never controlled these areas after being defeated by the Mapuche during the Arauco War. After independence, there were attempts at mediation, such as the Treaty of 1856 and a series of memorandum exchanges in which both countries presented their claims over Patagonia. Despite this, no concrete agreement was reached, and tensions began to rise during the 1870s. This is when both countries began their campaigns to occupy southern territories, known as the conquest of the desert by Argentina and the pacification of Araucanía by Chile, names that are not at all greenwashing and do not hide the violence that follows. Who did them? Putin? The invitation to join the Peru-Bolivia alliance seemed like the perfect opportunity for the Argentinians. However, not all that glitters is gold. Argentina was not going through its best moment. Since its independence, there was a series of civil wars between Federalists and Unitarians, which did not end until 1880s. They also had a recent war against Paraguay, which, although it ended in victory, brought economic consequences. On the other hand, at that same time, the conquest of the desert began against the Tehuelches and Mapuches of Patagonia. In other words, the Argentinians were not exactly eager to keep fighting. They also lacked the energy and military resources. The army was not in a position to fight a prolonged war, and in a distant theater like the Atacama Desert or the Peruvian coast. Regarding the tempting offers from Peru and Bolivia to join the alliance, Argentine politics and public opinion were divided. The main supporter of joining the war was Carlos Tejedor, leader of the Autonomist Party of Buenos Aires. They even drafted a tripartite agreement with Peru and Bolivia. However, there was a lack of consensus in the National Congress and the treaty was never ratified. For his part, President Nicolas Avellaneda chose a more neutral and pragmatic stance. There was also fear that a war with Chile would cause an internal crisis, rekindling regional or separatist tensions. Instead, diplomacy with Chile was chosen and a definitive boundary treaty was signed with them. In July 1881, during the presidency of the well-known Julio Argentino Roca, the border was drawn along the line of the high peaks. The island of Tierra del Fuego was divided along the Andes mountain range. Chilean sovereignty over the Strait of Magellan was recognized, and the part that hurts more than one Chilean, Chile's renunciation of sovereignty over the territories east of the Andes, the vast majority of Patagonia. That's why some nationalist groups say that in reality, Chile lost 2 million square kilometers during the war. That's a bit exaggerated since in reality, Chile never actually controlled these territories. The point is that the treaty was signed in the middle of the war against Bolivia and Peru, so from the Chilean perspective, they couldn't afford to open a new front against Argentina. Signing the treaty guaranteed Chile the neutrality of Buenos Aires, allowing them to focus all their resources on the Pacific front. Its position in the middle of the war gave Argentina a better negotiating margin. The 1881 treaty was a true diplomatic triumph for them. What if Argentina hadn't stayed neutral like Switzerland and accepted Peru and Bolivia's invitation? The Chilean occupation of Antofagasta was interpreted by Argentina as a regional act of aggression, and it declares war on Chile, opening a second front, which changes the strategic balance. Although Argentina did not have a large navy and Chile quickly gained control of the Pacific, it had an army strengthened by the experience gained during the Paraguayan War and the Civil Wars. Argentina then launches operations in the Andean Patagonia, occupying disputed locations such as Lake General Carrera. Simultaneously, the Andean alliance presses Chile from the north. The Argentine land front, although initially successful, soon faces fierce resistance from settlers and Chilean forces in Araucanía, where Chile had advanced with its process of conquest. This turns the south into a bloody and difficult front to sustain. Within Argentina, just as Avellaneda believed, Federalist sectors begin to question the war, especially because of the costs and the distance from the theater of operations. By 1881, instead of signing a border treaty, negotiations between Chile and Argentina over the disputed area collapse. Naval battles then begin in the Strait of Magellan. Internally, the war accelerates the process of Argentine centralization, consolidating the power of Buenos Aires over the provinces, but also causing economic crises and popular discontent. Internationally, the large-scale South American War began to generate suspicion among the world powers. The most interested in ending it is the United Kingdom, which offers itself as a mediator. The war culminates in 1884 with a treaty imposed by London, which grants Argentina greater control over Patagonia. But it fails to recover Bolivia's access to the sea, the country that contributed the least to the Triple Alliance, nor to preserve the province of Tarapacá for Peru. The conflict leaves deep scars in the region, and the Argentine-Chilean rivalry becomes a permanent wound in the southern cone, which would later lead to new tensions. During the 20th century, back to reality, the effect of what I smoked has worn off. Argentina's non-intervention in the War of the Pacific was an excessive act that marked the delimitation of borders in South America. Apparently, it was the most pragmatic thing for Argentina and a way to avoid a new front from Chile that could have been catastrophic. Now it's your turn to let your imagination fly. How do you think a possible union of Argentina with the Peruvian-Bolivian alliance would have been? Don't forget to leave your comment and subscribe to the channel. I've included my social media links in the description, and in case you want to watch the new videos in Premiere and have more interaction with me, your donations on Patreon, Una Manito Net, or channel memberships are welcome. See you next time.